Hello and welcome to the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are doing our creator-owned indie comic deep dive into Bylines in Blood by Erica Schultz. And, oh God, we're recording too early in the morning.
Van Jensen.
Van Jensen.
As the co-writers. And
just
Aneke,
talked about him last week.
But. Yeah, and Aneke on art.
Okay, but the reason... the reason my synapses are misfiring is because it's before 9 a.m. But also, I came to the book because of Erica Schultz's name on it. I knew, like, I don't even think I was steeped in her creator-owned work, but I knew her title as a creator-owned. Anytime I see, like, a creator-owned person move into the indie world, I'm like, oh, hey, let's check this out. So anyway, yeah, I kind of want to start on page 1 of this book.
Okay, sure. Decent place to start.
It is, because I didn't have, I guess, appropriate expectations coming into this, but it's a 4-issue series that is in a, like, futuristic version of our world-ish.
Yeah. It's,
but not like crazy future, right? It's like,
yeah,
so it's a little different.
I think of when I see something like this, I think of like, I think you can't help but think of like Blade Runner,
Yes,
you think of like a Cyberpunk 2077 or something like that, where it's like, oh, this is definitely our world, but there are just enough like, it's not super far out future where, like the Jetsons or something like that, it's very much the world we live in, just kind of turned up to like 12 or 13.
Yes.
And where it's like, I think with stories like that, they stay grounded in their depiction of the world by showing that like the high end is well beyond what we have now, of like the high end of society is far beyond what we have now.
Right. But humanity is the same.
The bottom is still the same. And we see that you referenced the first page. We see that right then and there from the jump, that the way the people considered at the bottom of society are treated are the same afflictions, the same ills, troubles, problems, whatever they have, that hasn't changed. But what has changed is the super upper crust, which we have slightly better technology than we have now,
Right. Well, I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is I have read a lot of things like this where it's a short series. The world is like, kind of sci-fi built out or whatever. And a lesser writer can't help but just like dive into 4 pages of exposition about the world before they start storytelling. And that's not what Erica does. Erica starts, so you
Erica
get,
and Van.
Erica and Van, right. You get, right. So I don't know, who wrote the introduction. Could have been either of them. I think the way they split it, but you get the colors, kind of neon futuristic, kind of sending out that vibe. If you're like going in totally blind, you see what appears to be a Foxman for like 1 split second, and you read what he's saying, and then you get the side angle, and it's like, oh, it's just a human in a mask.
Yeah.
But the voiceover is very hard-boiled detective, right? It's it's almost like there's like a really long voiceover narration at the beginning of the Matt Reeves Batman that felt like a little cut and paste, and so I think it's just brilliant the way that Van and Erica have set up this world, and after 1 page it's like, okay, like I see the world we're in. It's familiar but different, probably leaning futuristic. Well, but more importantly, I know the story we're in, which is the hard-boiled detective.
The question that I would ask is, from that first, the first image is a third of a page, and it's a cityscape, right?
Right.
What do you see in there that says the future? You see large neon billboards.
Well, I think it's the colors. Billboards. Yeah, I'm like, there's nothing to say that you couldn't depict our world in those colors, but I tend to think of neon as futury. And maybe that's because I grew up I was born in the 80s.
Maybe so.
And
Maybe
anytime
so.
they
But
were like
I,
something
I,
futury, it's neon.
I guess what I would say is you look at that, when you look at those first couple of pages there, nothing to me jumps out as saying this is a future version of the world. You see people wearing masks, not just the Fox mask, but like actual, kind of like breather masks and things like that. Yeah, nothing here jumps out. Then as you move through here, like, we're introduced to our main character, Satya. She goes into a club which just looks like a club. That there's nothing seems to be special about the world.
Right. There's no talking holograms or anything like that.
5, 6, 7. I mean,
right. She pulls out a normal gun. Somebody brings a normal knife on her.
Yeah, she carries a normal hammer.
Her apartment is very, maybe even 10, 20 years ago.
We see that her job previously was working at a newspaper, which even in our world is coded as being, that's a dinosaur job from thousands of years ago, working in print media. So I mean, we're going through here. There is really nothing that jumps out at you, and then maybe my favorite non sequitur of the entire series is that she like plays in a rec league volleyball,
and that never comes up again.
Never comes up again. And the character who is I guess is an antagonist on the other team. There's clearly history there. They don't like each other. Doesn't make a difference. I don't know. But it's not until we meet her brother there, right? With his little camera drone. Yeah.
Right after the game. Nice game assists. And he's got his little floating drone, which is like,
is totally innocuous at the time. Like if you weren't paying attention, you miss it up until, the zoom in on her face when she's giving it the bird. And you're like, oh wait, that's a thing there. It's very, and then I think maybe we start seeing a little bit more of the city and all of that. And then when in a few pages, when Satya goes to and meets Jen, and we see, oh, now this is, at least from a tech standpoint, we're well beyond kind of what our world is. But up until that point, I don't want to say it's hidden from the reader, but it's almost like it's you're right in that it's not. Putting that on Front Street wasn't important to them.
Right.
Shouting from the rooftops that
I think the publisher makes it very clear in the solicitation or description that it is futuristic. But yes, like apart from those things, and then you get the floating robot. But I mean, you brought up the volleyball thing, and what I thought was interesting about the volleyball is that I read the description of the book, the non-spoiler description, which is that, it's like a former journalist, private eye type thing. And that type of character is not necessarily action star / athletic, agile, whatever. Yeah. I think of, oh my God, Cormoran Strike, like the Robert Galbraith detective series that, it's very, very popular, and like he's got a prosthetic leg that like anytime he tries to like tail someone at more than a brisk walk, his leg glitches out on him, and it's like, well, I can't do that. So he has to work around that. But this is kind of like the, how they sprinkle in every once in a while that like Sherlock Holmes is into bare knuckle boxing. It's like, it's like, okay, well, it's not my picture of like the recluse, socially awkward genius detective, like, oh yeah, and he can also like throw some punches. But so I think that makes for an interesting cocktail of a character, and I think that's what makes this story so interesting, is that if you kind of like sci-fi futuristic things, that's pretty well buried in the series, but there's enough of it there that it's interesting. And certainly like the commentary on truth is, a cynical projection of like where we're headed now. It's a little further downstream than where we are.
I think that is where what's more important in terms of this that sci-fi angle. This idea of you can have these personalized drone cameras that follow you around and record and live stream everything or whatnot. It isn't that's those specifics I don't think are what the focus is. I think the focus, what you said there, is that that's just a tool to get to the larger commentary about truth and what is truth and how can truth exist in a future world that isn't so many steps removed from the one we're in now. Like the sci-fi aspect, the idea that this tech exists isn't the draw here. It's not the main point. It's an aspect of the story that helps them that helps them get to the point that they're trying to reach, the larger commentary there. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there are sci-fi elements to the story, and not just the advanced tech of the drones, as we see otherwise. There's the camouflage suits and things like that. There are other things that make it very clear that Satya's world is multiple steps ahead of ours in terms of tech.
Yeah, when I logged this on Goodreads and I was writing my little thoughts about it, I saw that one friend of mine read it and was not crazy about it, and they are a diehard sci-fi reader, probably not here for the mystery, not here for the social commentary, which is hilarious, being a sci-fi person, because that's what sci-fi is. But yeah, he said something it's like sci-fi and they have tech, but only when the story needs it or something. I'm like, right, he's saying that as a criticism. I'm like, no, that's what it is.
That's an accurate description.
I don't think they set out to be this is a pure sci-fi play. To me, this reads first and foremost as the mystery noir thing.
Yes.
And the setting serves the underlying story of, the newspapers are dead and the only people out for truth are no one in the system, cops, police, judges, politicians. The accountability of the paper is gone. So there is no institution fighting for truth anymore. It just has to be any particular individual.
It has to be one person willing to,
right.
Yeah. I will say,
which I think is a pretty great setup.
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree.
The story, a good story can write itself when you I think what did it was Pornsack was telling us, and I think he got this from Mike Carey, that was something about how if you pitch your tent in the right soil, the story will tell itself. If you're really strategic about where you set up shop, and get the setting right and put the right characters in there, the story will just unfold for you. And I think it's a complicated enough setup, that she's a rich kid who's abandoned her richness. And then, by the end of the issue, when she goes to see the tech cult, it's oh yeah, this is definitely futuristic sci-fi. By the end of the
but again, it's not
issue.
So far about it. It's not that we. Yeah. Well, and it's not that it's not important. It's not important to the setting, really. I was thinking about why this volleyball scene really sticks out, not because we don't go back to it. I think because that's a moment where some creators would have said, oh, she's going to go blow off steam and do something quote unquote normal. She's going to go play a sport. And then they would have invented some ridiculous future sport.
Right.
Without no explanation, right? Because we've seen her do some investigating. We've seen her, use her hammer, draw a gun, fight with the police, do all that stuff there. All very normal, regular activities that we see PIs do in our world and in the stories of our world. And then she has to go blow off steam and she's playing in said rec league volleyball. There's a world where that was some wildly ridiculous futuristic sport with no explanation. It's just that's your signal to the reader that we're in the future, and they resisted that urge. Now, why do we get 2 pages of volleyball specifically? I don't know. I don't think
my guess is that Van or Erica likes volleyball.
Maybe so, or Aneke wants to draw volleyball. I don't know. I guess it does it in some way it grounds Satya, right? It humanizes her that she has other things to do. And then of course the very next scene is family dinner, and you already mentioned that Satya's a rich girl who is deliberately
she eschews her privilege.
Yeah. Which is a very, I mean, you think about that kind of character archetype, that character exists throughout everything. And it's very easy for that when your main character is of that persuasion, is cut from that mold, I think to really fall into stereotypes. And I think that's something that Erica and Van do very well, where they still try to make her a little more complex without doing these stereotypical things I think the rich character not pretending or
no, I mean there is that that's exactly what I was going to say, because I think you are inviting a level of scrutiny about the character when you find out, like, oh, she actually has a support system and access to all these resources,
but choosing
doesn't
not
use
to.
it. Right. So now we're like, I think a 2024 reader is on the lookout for hypocrisy. It's like, okay, well, she doesn't want it for everyday life, but she's going to tap into that eventually, and that's where her whole character breaks down. And she doesn't. I mean, like, yes, she gets like a free meal here, but it's like, I'm not under the impression that she was on the brink of starvation. Like, this was not her only option for food.
No. But then you start also thinking about, I think when we look at a character now, is that whatever she's trying to do, whatever her end goal is, whatever her crusade happens to be, couldn't she do it a lot better if she were well funded? You know?
Well, I mean, if you had a utility belt.
It's that idea, right? That if she accepted this money or help or whatever it is, isn't it possible that she could do quote unquote more good if she utilized this and took it in her own direction? Because I mean, I guess what's the worst that could happen there? Her parents cut her off. And then she's back to, so I think that's the setup you have for a character like this. Like you said, it invites criticism. It invites someone to look at your main character, your protagonist, and not so much maybe question their motives, but it makes them, I don't know, it makes them less perfect, right?
I think it makes them like Britta on Community, where, like, do you remember, like, later in the show, she found out that, like, she moved in with Abed and Annie, and they got a new couch for her, and it had her last name on it, and they were like, she was like, wait, you bought this couch for me, but it has my last name on it? And they were like, yeah, we need to be sleeping on it. It turns out her parents have been paying for it, and they've been, like, lending money to all her friends so that they can lend her money. So her parents have been, like, puppet supporting her for years, and then, like, she finds out that all her friends are actually friends with her parents, and they were like, what were you rebelling against? They're delightful. I mean, because I think that's the other thing is, like, later in the story you're like, well, sure, there must be some dark underbelly to her family, and it's like, so first of all, the reason I think she couldn't use the money and resources to advance her business is her parents don't know what she does. She's lied about that. So obviously, if they found out she was putting herself in danger, yada, yada, getting on the wrong side of powerful people, they'd probably cut her off anyway. And she probably has already played that out in her head. And it's like, not worth it. I'll just keep them in the dark, and I'll do it without funding.
And I still get a free meal once in a while. Maybe that's what it is.
Right. Yeah. I check in. And to let them know that I'm okay.
That's fair.
And don't harbor, like, any hard feelings. Like, she used to rebel against her parents' religion, and now she's like, I'm not a practitioner, but I'm willing to lie about it because it makes dinner easier. It's that makes sense.
All right. Okay. I can buy that. That's it. But I do think you're right in that the setup for Satya is a character to invite criticism, to be thought about as to why is this person the one who, I don't know, thinks she's righteous enough? Why is she the one who thinks that she's the only one that can do this? That sort of thing. I think that's worth looking into, and as a reader worth examining as to why is this person the one who is out here thinking that they can maybe not change the world, but they're the only one that can uncover the truth.
Right.
Why do they think they have to be on this solo mission for good?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of always the question, and I think she is confronted with that a little bit at the end. Not as directly, but it basically comes down to, for her, like, oh, I don't even care like what you think my reasons are, or what like the highest possible reason would be. In the end, I'm digging into this because he was my friend. And
yeah. Well,
and I kind of respected that move, that it was like, oh yeah, she's not like some perfect pietist character. She's like, this is personal.
I agree. I think that is a smart move by the creators in terms of saying, is she's a protagonist. Sacha's our good guy. She's our main character, but is she a good person? She's a person of conviction, but
right. Well, which is, I think, very similar to, if you listen to like Daniel Craig interviews about Bond.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one interview where someone said, like, what is it about this character that you really look up to, or whatever. He's like, oh, I don't look up to this character. It's a terrible person. Yeah. And they were like, oh, kind of surprised. And then he like tried to dig himself out a little bit. He was like, I guess if I had to say something, it's his like drive. Like, he's a creature of pure force of will.
Yeah.
And it's that's interesting enough, I think, as an actor to choose to depict. And I think Sachi is very similar. Like, it's kind of remarkable how short of time span this whole story, all 4 issues, unfold in. Yeah. But also, I think it's probably issue 2 where she first encounters that figure in the reflective suit, that's like, quote unquote, invisible.
Invisible, yeah, whatever, called invisible.
And when I caught wind of, like, oh, that's an actual assassin killer, someone with a knife and is invisible, now's the time to like run away and regroup. And that is not what Sachi does. Sachi's like, get over here. I'm gonna beat you to death, and like starts chasing down and just unloading round after round. And it's like, oh, that is a different character than I expected from our kind of investigatory detective doing this as a favor for someone. Like, once she's in something, she's all the way in. She doesn't like dip her toe in the water.
Yeah. Well, and I think that when as you track her through the story, you mentioned the end there in terms of what her end reason is. I think about all the way at the end when she has solved the mystery of her mentor's death, and like nothing's changed for her.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
except now she's got a reputation.
Yeah.
And this is really the origin story for.
Well, but also, okay, so the mayor is gone, but like the world hasn't changed. She didn't do this to try and change the world and expose how awful and how corrupt. I think people just know. So like, she hasn't changed. At best, you exposed
one person who's dead.
Yeah.
Can't be held to justice. Can't spill the beans on more people.
Yeah. So you're right. It's such a small personal story for her, because that in itself is what our character, what she is about, and that it's not about she isn't the vigilante that goes out and saves the whole city. She doesn't become the hero in that way. She just gets her own satisfaction, and she's, from what we can tell, she's okay with that. She got into this to find out who killed her mentor and friend, not to expose the corruption and lies of the government, because everyone knows that exists. That was like a byproduct of what happened here.
Right. She wants truth. It's not even worth saying, really.
Yeah, she wants truth, in that she's trying to find out what happened to her mentor. That's the truth she wants. She wants truth for that. And as it plays out, it's larger commentary and kind of an expose on the truths that society is telling itself. Because of the story that he was tracking down before he died, that Satya picks up, you know,
Right.
because she's hunting for her truth in answering for this murder. It does expose the larger fallacy of truth in their world. But again, it doesn't change anything in the end, because that's not why she was trying to do this. There is a part of her, I think we see that in some of the flashbacks, the idea of her being an investigative journalism, a crime journalist. And I think it's so very clear those specific moments are brought in from Van's point of view, from his experience as a crime reporter.
Right.
I think the specificity of some of those scenes and interactions, I'm sure, are things that were taken directly from his life, or whether they happened to him or colleagues or things like that. But that's so lived in. It's clear that someone has that, who's writing this has that experience. But we do see that I think we're shown that because they want us to see that Satya has that drive. She has that innate drive to find truth, and she's relentless in that way. But when we see her in the current day, it's not that is twisted in so much as that she still wants to find it, but she wants to find it for herself. That drive is still there, but it's pointed in a slightly askew direction, where it's not about bringing down everything, because I think it's almost like she's resigned that can't happen. All she wants to know is who killed her friend, and what happens after that, whatever dominoes that may happen after that. It's almost like she's apathetic towards it. She doesn't really care.
She kind of washes her hands of it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, if it happens, it happens. It's great. That's not why I did this, even though a couple years earlier, when she was investigative reporter, that may have been her driving goal. Expose the corruption, hold a mirror to those people in power. That would have been her drive. That's not her anymore, but she still has that conviction. It's just got to aim it in a different direction. And I think that makes the character interesting, in that she's like actively not looking to be a hero, and does not care really so much for the consequences of the end. Because that's part of Jen's plea, right? At the end, before, when they're up on the tower, after she exposes Jen has a thing of like, listen, we can do,
oh yeah.
They're speaking to a greater mission that Satya could be a part of, and she's basically like, nah, I don't care.
Yeah.
She's like,
Which I really respect it. And I'm wondering if
yes,
if this,
it's cynical. There's a cynical aspect to it for a character, but I respect it as well.
I think there's cynicism, but not like nihilism to it.
Yeah,
which
that's
I think,
good. That's good. Yeah,
cynicism pushed too far can just become nihilism. Nothing matters. Yeah, there's no point in doing anything. And I'm kind of wondering, like, if this approach is maybe what should have been the state of journalism in the Seeds. Remember, because there was like a journalistic detective, like investigatory.
Yeah.
In fact, that was kind of like the lead pitch from Dark Horse, which I thought was bad. A bad marketing of that book when it came out.
That also remember COVID paused there, so that, for all we know, that could have been, because that journalism aspect is more prevalent in the first couple issues, which is what you're kind of basing your solicitation on, and then we don't know how it really would have changed, or how the story did change when it came out eventually in a full story. So maybe Aneke and Dividaha, maybe they shifted their focus a little bit here and there. But you're not wrong there in that the solicitation does focus a little more on the journalism aspect. But I'm saying that may not entirely be Dark Horse's.
That's true. Right. But it wasn't really there in the first issue either. I think it was like, that was probably the elevator pitch, and it seems like they just never really updated it, because it was like, I mean, here's a name that's going to sell books, right? It's like Aneke going to sell books. And the solicitation was like in the ballpark. But anyway, I was like, that was where, I mean, that was 200 years after the Bylines and Blood type of world. It's like things have literally rotted and decayed beyond everything, yet there's still a newspaper going in the Seeds, which is like, do you think there's going to be a newspaper going in our city in 15, 20 years? Like a print newspaper?
Probably not. Although I guess maybe with the Seeds, though, the idea is that,
I know you're pot committed in riding it to the ground, but
I'm saying with the Seeds, though, that is more, it's more like actively dystopian. So it's almost like we're going back. It's almost like de-evolution there, that the world's breaking down.
Right. Oh
So
yeah.
we have less tech in that world, outside of, the aliens that come in. But so there are areas of like no tech. Like there's a Ludic aspect to that story. So maybe the fact that print journalism still exists there makes a little more sense. I don't know here, but there's obviously a layer here in Bylines and Blood that I'm guessing again comes from Van because of his background. The idea of the death of newspapers, the death of that that part of media,
Right.
which then as leads to this idea of no one out there looking for the truth, no one out there fighting for that, doing the work, putting the effort in to hold people accountable, which is what you lose when you lose that level of journalism. So I think there's a slight bitterness, I think, in Satya when she thinks back on that. And I can't help but think that part of that may come from Van in terms of, look at what we've lost. Look at how much worse off we are because we don't have this as it was before, you know?
Right. Which is it's a fresh angle on it because I think
Yeah.
anytime someone wants to write a story where they lament the state of journalism, it's always like, oh, here's a detective who, or an investigative journalist who really wants to do the right thing, but the man's keeping them down. Like there's the boss is leaning on them because someone's leaning on him, and it's like, we can't pursue this story, man. We're just, we got to shut it down.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone. Don't poke at this story anymore. And they're like, I can't do that. I care too much about the truth. It's like,
Yeah.
no one cares. There's no paper.
Yeah.
No one cares.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It's a refreshing angle, actually.
and I think on top of that is that when the ex-reporter goes out and is no longer a reporter, they still are a reporter because reporters have standards and ethics and things like that. Satya doesn't have that. Satya kept that drive, but she's also like, she'll also whack you in the knee with her hammer,
Right.
So it's that idea. It's they want to maintain the idealized notion of the journalist, that
Right.
even when they're not a journalist, you're still a journalist. There's still a code of conduct, a way to do things. There's a way to act. There's ethics in terms of finding out the truth and things like that. That even though they're not reporting it, they still do things by the book that way. And I do like that with Satya. That it's more realistic, where it's just like, nah, I'm gonna do what it takes now to get to help my clients solve my cases, whatever it is. If that includes kneecapping somebody with my hammer, then so be it.
It's hard to even listen to saying kneecap as a verb like that,
Yeah,
or
well,
a participle.
yeah, but no, so I said I think you're right. It makes the character more interesting in that they aren't preoccupied with making her perfect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And honestly, so far from perfect. And like she really doesn't seem to appreciate her buddy that much. I was gonna say roommate. I don't think they're roommates. I think they're just friends.
Yeah.
And
he does the books, I guess, accounting.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
they resisted the urge for him to be like the guy in the chair. Like he's doing the stitching, clean her up a little bit,
Yeah.
but he's not like helping her with the investigation. He's just literally keeping her alive.
Yeah. Yeah. The implication is that that he's accounts payable, I guess, like he's there, he's a friend, he helps. And obviously we see him, what was it? Is it Joe? I can't remember his name now.
That is a good question because they're not constantly saying each other's names. So I've got him up right here, but
Tom.
I think you'd only get it like the first time you meet him.
It's Tom. Yeah. Yeah.
Tom.
The very generic name there. He obviously plays a role. He's a stand-in later on. So that it is someone. It is someone that she trusts. She bounces ideas off him, things like that. He seems more preoccupied with getting high and eating burritos, which totally fine. But we do see he has some utility. He has some. He serves a role, a purpose in her life beyond just being someone she uses. He's helpful there. But yeah, that relationship is clearly just like, yeah, I works for her, helps out when he needs to, but understands that she's going to go off and do her own thing. There's not much she can do to stop it, you know.
Right.
And I think that's apparent in maybe it's my I'm torn between what my favorite sequence in the book is. It's a tie between in issue 2, right after you mentioned, right after Sacha meets the invisible assassin, what we're calling them,
Right.
Where in the middle of that fight there, we get that 9-panel grid.
Yeah, the paneling
where Sacha's in the center and she's firing, and you start from the top left corner and you work clockwise around as she's following and shooting and trying to nail this invisible assassin. That's a great scene. And then in issue 3, yes, at the end of issue 3, after the giant the big fancy gala that Sacha gets busted up, she gets she gets outed and beaten up, and we're down with Joe in the restaurant here. So Tom, and he's sitting there looking at his phone, eating a burrito, and we see, like the window out front on the street there, and then little by little, car shows up, pulls up closer, door opens, Sacha's thrown out, car goes away, and then she's finally noticed there, and just that sequence of things there. So we see, I love the storytelling in both those, but here specifically with our character Tom here, we get the sense of, we understand what the relationship is, that he understands that nothing he could have done to prevent what happened at this gala, right?
and he's not lecturing her for having gone, perhaps trying to restrain her from going out again too quickly, but doesn't even really put up much of a fight there. He's just like, I just think you should hear what a good point of view is, and I'm going to leave it at that.
And he knows he couldn't have done anything to prevent or mitigate what happened before. But now that she's been dumped back on the doorstep, he's like, all right, well, this is what I got to do here. And there is just that level of trust there, because you're right. Yeah. All he's doing is offering the other perspective, knowing that it probably is not going to land, but he gets it. Listen, someone's got to say it, right? Someone's going to be the person that says the reasonable thing there. But that's a fun relationship there in terms of that kind of because it could have been very much guy in the chair thing, guy in the chair trope archetype guy who has
which
all the
I think is one of those things now where, kind of like in the MCU Spider-Man movies, where it's like, if you're gonna do something as blatant as having the guy in the chair, you have to be like self-aware and meta about it.
Yes.
Like, you have to be self-referential because it's such a trope.
Yes. Yes.
Which also, I think I'm not. I think it's. You'd have to go out of your way to think I'm insulting the Spider-Man movie, because I think those are super fun. But
you're right though. That's the only way it works. So if they were to do that here with Tom, it would have had to have been. He would have had to have made some, like, at any point there's a scene like because where would it have fallen? It would have fallen like when Sacha first goes to Jen, right? Doing the recon and going and seeing this, whatever this cult of personality that Jen's built. Tom would have been in her ear. That would have been the tech move. That would have been the thing where he's running background.
You would have replaced the narration boxes, or like the inner monologue voices.
Yes,
with dialogue.
Yes, absolutely. And he would have had to have made some comment. He would have had. You're right. He would have had to have been self-aware to make some reference of being the guy in the chair, of being Q, or something like that. You'd have to make some sort of metatextual reference, which would have been trite, but you would have been expected to do it. So it's probably best that didn't happen. And that scene with the banker, by the way, I got my issues out of order. That was at the end of issue 2, not issue 3. I wanted to make sure. Cleared that up there.
And, I'm being a little sloppy with that because now I'm looking at it in the trade. I have it single issue physically and digitally in trade. So I've got it digitally up on my screen for podcasting purposes. And I'm like, I've got a 25% chance of guessing which issue it was in.
Yeah, it's pretty close there. Yeah. So, but
so
yeah,
we haven't discussed the actual antagonist at all, because really the antagonist is like the world, right? It's the setting.
Yes,
it's the state of truth, right?
Yeah.
It's like no one cares, and that's actually the problem here.
Yeah, it's the structure of society that is your antagonist. That's what we're fighting against.
And then the actual antagonist, like the villain of this story arc or whatever, is kind of like just the embodiment of that. He's the stand-in.
Yeah,
for the world.
Yeah. Well, I think you're set up to think obviously that the mayor is the bad guy, right? He's the evil, corrupt one, and then it just turns out he's just an evil, corrupt one, because if he weren't there, the next person's going to be just as bad.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a little bit of the like a little bit worse. Like, he's very self-aware about what he's doing.
Oh yeah, he's unabashedly corrupt.
Right. Whereas I think a lot of people lower than him just kind of swim in the water, aren't as thoughtful about what they're doing. Whereas like he's intentionally pretending to be a victim. He's like pulling on sympathies. He's knocking out the right people in power. Like, he's a very cynical guy.
Wait, you're talking about Jen?
Is that his name? The guy who
the cult
claims
leader,
he has the skin.
Yeah, I'm talking about the mayor.
Oh, the mayor. Yeah, no, the mayor's just an idiot. Yeah,
but he is set up as the villain because he's the misdirect.
Right. He's the fake villain.
Yeah. He is unabashedly evil, and then of course he gets murdered by Satya's doppelganger in that case. The one of Jen's followers, and
that was a great twist.
That was cool.
It was like, the invisibility suit also has this kind of next level feature.
Yeah.
And
which is obviously the most sci-fi-ish aspect. That's the most techie, well beyond our universe aspect of this.
Well, yes and no, because like I think this is the last election in 2024 that we will have in this country where people are not getting duped by like deep fake audio and video content about the other candidate. And I think like the 2028 election is going to be.
Oh, you're equating
scary.
that to so
right.
You're,
so I'm saying
you're
like
equating that to like a okay.
So it doesn't matter. Like obviously Satya saw that suit in the room, knew it wasn't her, but even if it was like kind of sloppily done and it was caught on a security camera, it probably would have looked close enough to her to be damning. And like, I mean, yeah, I just, someone, for the sake of their own amusement, I saw yesterday someone had used like a deep fake AI voice simulator to do Barack Obama singing Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash, which was pretty convincing audio. And I was like, okay, well, let's say, whoever your 2028 candidate is, somebody hates them because they're on the other team, and somebody uses like an AI, voice thing like that to make some heinous speech from that person. People who hate that other candidate will not be scrutinizing like, well, is this real? Is this AI? It would spread so much faster than it could be corrected, which has been kind of the problem of the modern world and social media, is that lies spread twice as fast and go more viral than truth. And there was actually study about that. There was a study about how negative news spreads so much further and faster.
Well, yeah.
Than positive news.
And
that's probably not new.
For whatever reason, and maybe it's obvious, and maybe I'm the idiot on this one. The idea of equating this moment here, the idea that Satya has been caught on film, quote unquote, caught on film murdering the mayor because of that special reflecto hollow suit mimicking her. I did not equate that to the idea of deep fakes and AI and things like that to manipulate the media, to manipulate the truth.
Well, I don't know if you're supposed to, but that is where my mind went with
but
it,
now
because
that you
I was
said
reading it in 2024.
But now that you said that, now that seems so obvious. It's just this is the analog way to do that in this story, the analogous way, that they don't have to fake the video, because they have the tech to allow, like, someone with the physical outward image of who looks like Satya murdered the mayor. Like, that's actual truth, because that's what the tech in the suit can do. The truth is not, however, that Satya actually murdered the mayor, but the idea that you can manipulate the images in that way to form a narrative, that absolutely feels analogous to the idea of manipulating video, just manipulating video and audio in the way that we can do it now in our world. It does feel like that's analogous
on the laziness of the people receiving the information, which is been pretty well established in Bylines and Blood. Like, there is no newspaper, there's no investigatory journalist that's going to be like, hey, this type of technology might exist, maybe someone was setting this up. It's like, no, the police don't care. And had the two cops who hate her not also seen the person in the suit, and seen two of her at once,
she's screwed.
She's totally screwed. And even then, they know and aren't willing to stick their necks out for her. It's like, that's kind of messed up, because I feel like it was supposed to be a little bit of a noble moment for cops that we didn't otherwise like. And I'm like, no, they suck just as much as I thought they did.
I think that's viable in this case, because who would believe them? Like, what's gained by going out on a limb? Because I think there's something to be said for that, because there is that moment after that happens when they have this little secret meetup, and they're in like their cone of silence or whatever, and both of them are just like, listen, we can't unsee what we saw. Like, we doesn't matter what else is out there. Like, we know this is true. But I think part of it's not just self-preservation. They're not just being selfish. I think there has to be a level of, like, what's gained by coming out and saying that, because no one, you can't prove it,
right?
So people just think you're crazy, although the idea of this invisible reflective, that kind of tech, I guess, has to be considered plausible in their world, but still without any proof.
Right, that's my thing. It's like, it has to be plausible in this world, and
but without any proof,
all they need to do is care a little bit that an innocent person doesn't get locked away, or that the truth come out. And it's like, okay, well, they're post-truth, that's been pretty well established, but it's just like, jeez, to me, that's just like unforgivable that you would be such a spineless cop, knowing with your own eyes, and two witnesses, right? If it was one of those two partners, that would have been an interesting wrinkle, right? Like, they both are predisposed to hate Satya. One of them saw the doppelganger, the other one did not, and then they're bickering between each other because they would both have to stick their neck out, or both not stick their neck out. That's an interesting twist, where it's like, no, they both know better and still kind of have to be like harassed into doing the right thing, which is like, I guess that is how accountability and power structures work in our world too. I remember like Jon Stewart's big campaign to get like 9/11 first responders like medical funding, where he went to Congress and was like sitting in things, and he was like, I'm here to shame people into doing the right thing, because we've tried everything else. So now I'm just going to have to shame them. Like, I'm going to be walking through the halls of Congress with a camera crew, asking people questions until shame catches up to them and they do what they said they would do and what they know is the right thing to do. And it's just like, oh boy, this is bleak.
It's not great there. But I think while I agree that what we call it, maybe like that split dynamic between the partners would have been interesting, especially given that our introduction to them is that they're both corrupt, they're both kind of idiots, and then if one of them had seen and believed Satch and the other one hadn't, there's some interesting story tension there. I guess ultimately, because those characters don't matter in the end, like their involvement,
had they become
non-involvement, doesn't really factor into the ultimate end for the story and for Satya's her end game, you know. So it's
I think they were. I took it as like when you see them earlier and then you see them again here. Assuming this was like an ongoing series, I thought it was going to be like uh, uh, Detective Inspector Lestrade from Sherlock Holmes.
and that it definitely felt like that. I agree. This idea that
like, here's the constant friend slash foil slash rival.
There's
who's in the establishment.
Yes, because the private investigator, the PI, the vigilante, whatever it is, the person working outside of the system has to have at least one person on the inside of the system to help them operate. You know, it's that sort of thing. It definitely felt that way. But yeah, you know, ultimately for this story and the reveal of Jen's true nature and all the strings they've been pulling and things like that, the two cops just didn't matter. So,
right.
You know, yeah.
Well, especially if you view this as a complete 4-issue series.
Definitely, yeah.
Right? It's I think I'm talking about.
There's a little bit of cynicism too, and I think maybe in the idea of cops and policing, of just like incompetence is just there, you know, even when they know what the right thing to do and they can do it, they don't do it, and they're not punished for it. They're not necessarily promoted for it. They're just, this is what it is, you know?
Right.
Like the cops are just, the policing is just everlasting. You know, Sachi gets fed up and leaves those guys, and then we don't see him again, you know, like after that, like they're done. So they're a non-factor.
It's just amazing how I'm, even in every fictional setting, I'm disappointed in police.
Well, yeah, there is, you could argue maybe that they're the most true to life characters in this slightly futuristic book.
Yeah, you know? And I think they're more pragmatic than self-serving. I mean, they're definitely self-serving, but they're more pragmatic.
100%. They're the ones. They are. I think they're shown as people who look at the landscape and are saying, maybe partially, what's the benefit for me? Which obviously there's something there, but also what's the point of me not doing this? You know, why would I go against the grain here? What gives me the best opportunity? Which way are the winds blowing here? And why wouldn't I be a part of that? You know, why wouldn't I be a part of the establishment to just stay alive, have a job, you know, be able to exist in the world? And that's meant to be set in contrast to Satya, who doesn't care about any of that. You know, her only thing is her conviction to try and find truth for her, you know, uncover that for her, and I guess for her clients, because in this case, you know, it was the daughter of her mentor who came to her and told her that he had been killed. So I think that they're set in contrast to each other, not saying, I mean, the implication there is that Satya's way is good and the cop's way is bad. But yeah, it is just being, it's looking at the environment and saying, what's the easiest way to go? And maybe easy is not the word I'm looking for there.
No, I think it's more like they say, okay, you know, for each, they're consequentialists. They say, you know, for each action, it's like, if I do this and it works, here's the upside. Innocent person goes free, take down corruption, yada, yada. But if I do this and I'm wrong, I lose my job. I don't want to get another job. And it's like, even if the upside is,
I could lose my
2
life.
to 3 times the moral advantage. Right. Well, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But even if the upside is 2 to 3 times the advantage, like, they're kind of stoic. You know, they're like, I would rather avoid pain than pursue like great achievement.
And
unfair brush to paint stoicism with. But
there's a status quo-ness to them of like, yeah, it's all corrupt here, but like, this is how it is. And who are we to rock the boat and say otherwise, you know? Yeah, this guy's lining his pockets here, but you know, someone's going to do it. So might as well, you know, he be open about it and transparent about it, as if transparency, while still being corrupt, is somehow better than being corrupt in silence, you know?
Right. Well, yeah.
It's like those are the cops' justifications of being like, yeah, everyone knows this guy's crooked, so why not be a part of it? What's the point of being against that when everybody knows this? He's not trying to hide it, and so they, in their mind, they can justify whatever, taking bribes or doing things outside of what you would think cops would do because they know they're protected. But then, like, if everyone's on the same page, if everyone knows that's what the game is, then yeah, why wouldn't they do it? So they're able to rationalize, I would say for them, pretty quickly and pretty easily, all their actions and justify things that they do, because they can always just play back to, hey, this is just how the system is. This is the way things are. I didn't make the system. I'm just trying to be a part of it. They can have that deniability.
Right. Which I wanted to bring this up as a hard pivot, but the whole concept of truth in this book and all of the quotes from philosophers really had me. I'm keeping in mind our family friendly rating while also trying to reference the title of a book. But Harry Frankfurt, Princeton professor of philosophy, wrote a book in 2003, I think, called we'll call it BS. And he's writing around the time of, like, the Iraq invasion and yada yada, and there was a lot of talk about, like, the Bush administration, but he actually ends up being much more prophetic about what comes later, because he talks about the notion of BS, and he says, you compare BS to lying. He says, in order to lie, you have to know what the truth is and actively avoid it. Whereas, so he's like, so even a liar still holds the idea of truth as something, like, objective and something that has to be skirted around. Whereas someone who their art is in BS is detached from any obligation to truth. They're just like a bull in a china shop, and they just walk all over it. They might intersect with the truth, they might not, because they have no regard for the truth, whether to avoid it, tell it, whatever. Like, they're just living in their own reality. And
that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So I'm like, I keep waiting for that sci-fi where it's like, which is actually what we're living in.
Maybe that's why we're not seeing it in sci-fi.
Right. It's like I actually think the villains in this book are much more noble than the villains in, like, the world that we live in day to day, because, like, the villains here, maybe not the mayor, but certainly, like, the cult guy, he's very aware of the truth and is intentionally dancing around it, which means he's not post-truth. He's just completely immoral and willing to lie about it.
Using that, I would say the mayor of the town is your BSer, while Jen, leader of the cult, he's your liar.
Right.
The mayor cares for nothing. He will spin anything and say whatever it is because he's a dude in power.
Right.
Doesn't matter to him.
And it does not. So whatever serves his purpose in that moment. He'll contradict himself a week later, a day later, an hour later. It doesn't matter.
Because he knows it doesn't matter for him. And
whatever words get him out of the current situation, he will use.
But Jen in the cult that they're leading here is very much like, they know the truth, definitely. And they're because going out of the way to fake the side effects of whatever pandemic afflicted this world. It's the pale skin, right? The white skin,
right?
They're putting the makeup on to show, and you're right, to play a victim card there, because they're aware of the sympathy that can engender. And you're right. I think Jen knows the truth and is trying to actively work against it to suit his needs. Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's much more of an active decision than the mayor. You're right. The mayor is just, we'll throw anything at the wall at any time, and as long as I end up on top, it's all good.
Right. Well, and it's interesting that the liar was principally opposed to the BSer. Right.
Yes.
Those are the his goal was to take out the mayor.
Yes.
And it's actually like, your friend was just collateral damage, basically. It's like, we weren't anti-journalism. Your friend just didn't matter at all.
Yeah, it was just, he
It's
got in
just
the
like
way. Yeah.
so much worse to hear when it's like, oh yeah, no, I was against the mayor. The mayor was against everyone that isn't him, and just people got in the crossfire. Um, yeah. Also, I I meant to say like the cool bit of detective thing that I think in the first issue she gets that Bible out of his apartment. Maybe that's issue 2, but I think it's issue 1 toward the end.
I think it's issue. I think
It's got
issue
to be issue
two
2. Yeah.
because issue one ends with her going to the crime. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I know what you're talking about. Are you talking about the
No, no,
paint?
no. Okay, I'm in issue 1. She grabs the Bible and is
Oh,
like
okay, okay.
swinging it as someone grabs her and it turns out to
Oh,
be the
right.
cops.
Okay, okay. That's right. That's
Um
right. Yeah.
Now she doesn't look at the Bible until the second issue, but she just notes like, why would he have a Bible? He wasn't religious.
Mhm.
And that's enough for her to tuck it away in her trench coat, which people people forget about the investigative benefits of a trench coat.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It's like you can hide a lot of stuff in there.
A lot of stuff there. A lot of
Um,
stuff.
which just ask. That's a nice Matrix shout out for you there. Just ask Neo. Guns, lots of guns. But anyway, I thought it was cool that in the first issue, she picks up the key that will unlock things for her
Hmm.
and has to keep returning to it and gets kind of a new wave of revelation each time.
That's yes. That's the part I love about it is that it's plausible the steps that it takes for them to realize what the
What's in front of them the whole time.
what the
Yeah.
white substance is on the it's
Well, it's like, and his notes in there, like the things he's like underlined and written in the margins,
yeah.
and then the trace of stuff on the cover. It's like, yeah, it was all right there, planted at the beginning, and it's just great.
That was it was done well. And I will say though, I think you can pretty easily call early on the motivations of Jen. I think I don't know how big of a twist that is that all of a sudden that, hey, the creepy head of the giant tech company is secretly the bad guy. That's not a real
Right.
stretch. That's not a real stretch there.
Yeah, you're saying this in the same week that it just
Yeah.
came out that like Google was like, hey, so you know how like we have incognito mode?
Yeah.
We actually have been saving all that data.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but it's
Yeah,
for user experience. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have found personally that the best user experience is when you don't lie to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
What I'm saying is, I don't know if I think maybe they understood that wouldn't have been like the biggest twist out there. Again, that the evil tech genius, the tech mogul is evil. So I like that they added the small twist of, oh, and he's faking the pandemic side effects.
right.
That he's so megalomaniacal that he went the extra mile of putting the makeup on to get those sympathy votes. So I like that there was an extra bit of, yes, this guy's terrible, and he's just a little worse because of it too. There's just a little more there. That little twist, and having that be how Satya unlocks it. You're right. That's the key to it there. So our stories in character have something to go on, while us, the reader, can be like, you know what, that Jen guy, not very great. Probably the bad guy. It's almost like they figured readers would latch onto that, but they still needed a way to string that out and play that story out and have the twist still be a twist, where then the twist is not just that he was evil, but it's how Satya figured it out, and it's that he's faking these symptoms.
Right.
It's like this one extra little bit there, and I appreciated that because again, the tech mogul being the evil bad guy, like that's another pretty standard character trope, a character archetype that can feel stale to 2024 readers.
Yeah, I mean, I think of any time, um, like anytime people of privilege try to be like, "We get you, we feel your pain."
Yeah.
It's cringy, and I remember that there was a somewhat criticized. There was like early in the pandemic, there were a compilation of celebrities singing John Lennon's
Imagine.
Imagine. Yeah.
So terrible.
It was so cringy
So
because
terrible.
it was all like, we feel your pain. We're all in this together. As each of these celebrities in their private mansions
Yeah.
with like, it's like you were not cooped up in a 200 square foot studio in New York City
Yeah.
with no end in sight.
Yeah.
You were in a mansion with, servants and delivery people and, everything taken care of. And your rent was secured for next month. You do not understand the plight of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was one of those things. I'm not vilifying those celebrities in particular. I think that was more naivete
Absolutely. Yeah.
than what this guy's doing. This guy knows exactly what he's doing and is that much
Yes.
worse for it.
He understands that
he's not a dilettante.
Yeah. No, he understands that his message wouldn't come across if he appeared to be the rich tech mogul. He understood there had to be this other angle. He had to play that card, in order for his message to come out. He knows he's being manipulative and he's intentional about that. And again, that's what makes him, and I think that sets him in contrast in a way to Satya, who again, we know comes from a place of privilege,
Right.
But it's almost like she gets away with it because of her level of self-awareness, which maybe doesn't make it any better. But when she confronts him at the end and she's like, yeah, I'm selfish. I'm a liar. I'm no hero. But I think as she says, but at least I'm true to what I am. She's true to herself. She acknowledges that she comes from privilege and she acknowledges that she personally rejects it. And she acknowledges what that says about her. Amy doesn't care, but she understands what those factors come off as and how that shape her. And she's okay with that. Thus she can live her truth, which is, this an idea that comes up throughout the book versus what Jen is doing, which is again, obviously, and so intentionally, and I guess literally masking what his truth is because he knows that's the only way, or it was a surefire way to advance his cause by putting forth an alternative narrative that helped him get to where he was. And once Satya exposes that, you see he loses. He has a bunch of minions on the roof, and a bunch of them are all like, "Yeah, peace out." Of course, except for Kaylin, the assassin character, right? The one that we find out she was in the reflective suit and all that. So she's the one diehard, the one true believer. But everyone else is just like, oh, forget this guy. Once they find out he's full of crap, they bail on him. So that shows the power of the messaging that Jen had, which I guess in some way proves him right. That he know that by playing that card. I'm saying in terms of not right in terms of what he was doing, but the
no, I'm tracking
in his manipulation. That symbol was, if the makeup and the symptoms of the pandemic weren't that important, if they didn't play a factor when he's exposed as a fraud, his followers would have been like, it doesn't matter, we still believe in it.
Right. Yeah.
So the fact that they bail on him when that part is exposed as being a lie, I think it shows that he understood the manipulation. Jen knows how to pull the strings there. He's right about that. So I think thus he realizes that it was why it was so important to keep that lie going, because he knows how fragile it was. But he knew as long as he had it, as long as he was doing it, he could reach his end. But that's just how fragile the story is that he has built for himself. His truth that he's putting out there can be shattered so quickly.
Yeah. I'm kind of at the end of my notes. I'm kind of wondering where you are in terms of what you want to cover.
I don't know if I have anything. I think story wise, theme wise, I think we have everything. I think I do want to end on. Let's end a little bit on Aneke's art. Let's talk about storycraft a little bit here.
Well, you've already called out brilliant paneling.
Yeah, there's some really cool paneling stuff that goes on. There is the wonderful sequence that opens issue 3, just past the halfway point. I guess if you're reading in the trade, you know when you get to it because you got to turn the book sideways. It's the landscape view Lady Dick comics that are stylized right. Like a Sunday comic strip or something like that in your newspaper. Just a very cool idea. I'm always a big fan when creators decide to take swings like that, and throw in a different format. And obviously the comic, the name Lady Dick had been, that's what Sacha calls her agency, and it's even referenced by her that was a comic that exists in their world, so it's like we're seeing the version of what that comic strip was that inspired
right
Sacha in the first place, things like that. But I love seeing things like that. I think there's some really very, very bold use of color. You already talked about kind of the neonish aspect to the world. Even when we see a lot of the city early on, it's like dark and in shadow, kind of rainy sometimes, which is again all the hallmarks of dystopian, utopian future in our world. Much like Blade Runner, it's always got to be dark and then later on maybe,
but also always serves to bring out that Dick Tracy yellow.
Yes,
especially the first page inside, where you get just the foot.
Yeah,
and it's like it's the first page. It is page 1 of the entire series. This really bleak world, and in the bottom right corner is a Dick Tracy yellow shoe,
the yellow boot,
stepping in to be like putting an end to this.
Yeah,
and then obviously the inner lining of the jacket
and the belt. Yeah, no, there are some very
and then the dress
colors. Oh yeah, her outfit to the gala there.
The outfit with no hammer.
Combo, yeah, no place for a hammer. It's tough. You can't go somewhere without your hammer. It's difficult. But no, I think there are some. I said I love. There's a cleanliness to Aneke's character design. It's not overly drawn. I like the flatter colors. I think it works, and that's kind of my personal favorite style. So I love seeing that, and I love there are some when I don't think it's always yellow. Maybe it's mostly yellow. But when there are oftentimes when there are accents, here we go. I found one here, like randomly, Sacha's brother, on the bag, his shoulder bag, there's like a yellow stripe, quasi stripe there, just on the strap. And there are times like at the end when the final confrontation and Sacha's shirt just says kill, kill, kill on it. It's a black shirt with yellow writing on it. And it's yellow. You can see it's yellow on the inside as well. Because sometimes you can see like her, on her sleeve or whatnot. So there's a yellow trim to it. So there are these highlights that just jump out, very bright primary yellow color. And I don't know why that is. Maybe artist preference or whatnot. But there's something about having those accents there that jump out in so many of the early scenes, like at nighttime, there's obviously very blues and purples and things like that. And then a lot of the backgrounds are in the daytime, they're, I don't know, orangey, red orangey kind of thing, whether it's when
our villain is wearing a yellow tie early, but it's a like muted dull shade of yellow.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is it's kind of a weird choice to say, like, here's these two characters are connected by different shades of the same color.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something about that. There's something about that too. But no, I love the way the color pops, the way it uses. It's not, I feel like we talked about kind of neon. That's not.
No, that's really only the opening. That's like the fluorescence and neons.
when you think about those kind of neon pastels, I think I think about someone like Cliff Chang.
Right.
Whether
Or
that's
Matt Wilson. Yeah.
yeah, when those two guys work together, the way like we talked about in Paper Girls very much has that, and then when Cliff Chang
Lonely
went and
City.
did
Yeah.
Lonely City on his own, there's a general vibe and feel for that. We don't get that quite that level of neonishness here. There's still a flatness to it. There's maybe not a dullness to it, but there's a little bit toned down. I think that's meant to match the idea of the world. Again, the being in this slightly future utopia slash dystopia world that we live in now, which again that comes from this idea of, I think our minds fill in some of those blanks, because if you've seen Blade Runner and stuff like that, you know, you pop culturally, what that world is supposed to look like and feel like and smell like and all of that, because we've seen it so often in other media. And I think they're playing with those ideas and those tropes. And the vibe feels right. The vibe feels right with those colors. And I think also, even when, some of these panels don't have backgrounds, they just they go with a solid background color, and all that I think is meant to evoke mood and style. And I think it works. I think it's smart and it's judiciously doled out.
I think it's strategic. I mean, I think it's also about an economy in art creation. Like, I just remember
100%.
Jonathan Hickman was talking about that in the Nightly News. He's like, I would have loved to have drawn like chairs and windows and everything in every panel, but I'd still be working on this book basically if I was going to do all that. So a lot of it's just like, here's a color, here's a texture. And
if I draw three shapes, if I draw three shapes and two colors, I can just replicate that and I'm all good. Yeah.
Well, you set the scene with the background, and then the reader knows where you are until you change it. And, that's really smart, because I think it's like, if you had unlimited time, I guess you could draw like a backdrop in a scene for every panel, but it's like so much work for something that people's eyes are flying over.
And some creators do, because that's what they want you to focus on. They want you to see that. And so I think what works here with what is presented that Aneke has done is that it whether it's in the script or not, when there's a background in a panel and when there's not, is clearly intentional, because sometimes it'll vary on page. Like, first panel will have a background and character, and then maybe the second panel doesn't, solid color, and then third panel back to having the background there. So it's like they know what they want you to focus on, and so they're helping that along. They're facilitating that in a way that doesn't seem intrusive or obvious. If there's no background in the panel, your eyes are drawn to, again, what's left is just character. Whether you're focusing on a character's face or emotion or whatever body part is in the panel there, they want you to focus on that. And so that's why I think it was judiciously doled out, because they understood where the points of emphasis were, and by doing it that way, it's a visual way for them to point to show emphasis very quickly and very deliberately. And so by doing that, I think then the choice becomes then, well, what does your background color need to be? And I think that is blending in with what's on the rest of the page. But it's that initial choice of, are we filling in this panel or are we not filling in this panel? And I think as we move through this book, it becomes pretty seamless as to when they decide to throw that in there and when they don't. And what does that mean for what they're trying to tell you in that moment? What's important then and there on that page, on that specific part of the page, in that panel? What are you meant to focus on? What are they trying to tell you, the reader, as what's important? And I think that comes across in the book.
Yeah, I gotta say, the other person that we should just mention, just because we seem to be on a real kick with Cardinal Ray. This year.
Yeah.
I think she only has a handful, a couple dozen titles, which for a letterer is not a crazy number.
Yeah.
But we've covered Eat the Rich, Know
Mhm.
Your Station, and now Bylines of Blood. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and my big
There's
thing for a letterer is when I don't think about or notice the lettering, it's masterful.
Well, and I think what I'll say with this one is, and that's a good point to bring up. There's not a lot, I don't think, in terms of different text styles and things like that, different font styles. What this book does have a decent amount of are narration boxes because we are following in the tradition of the noir detective story where it's all internal monologue. So there's a lot of that coming from Satya, and so handling that and understanding how those boxes will play over the art, where you can put it, things of that nature, positioning of lettering, positioning of those boxes and those texts can be tough when there's an overflow of internal monologue. Because with dialogue, you're working from where the characters are, you know so your text balloons have to flow depending on where the characters are in each panel, in each scene, from panel to panel. When you're just working with narration boxes, you still have to move the reader's eye down and across a page. You
Right.
can't just put it in the top corner and say, here's, which is how they did it back in the day, which was like the top portion of the panel was just, we're going to put the text right here.
Right.
Like that's how it was back in the early days. So now there's still a level of understanding how the reader's eye is going to move down the page to help create motion without dialogue. You're just reading someone's thoughts as you follow the character through the scene. So there's work that goes into that that's more than just typing up the text and slapping a border around it. So no, I think Cardinal Ray did a great job here with not having as much to do in terms of maybe variety, but there's
It's not
still
the creativity of like, I take an intentional beat now to notice lettering ever since our discussion on Descender and Ascender,
yeah
where you caught like not just the different colors and the
yeah
different fonts, but the different shapes of the
yep
boxes.
yep. Is it
And
rounded? Is it squared? Yeah,
right,
they're
it's like a letterer can do so much subconscious work on you as a
mhm,
reader,
yeah.
that they really wield a lot of power.
They can, yeah, because if they've chosen the wrong font, and there are some fonts that just
Don't
uh,
get me started on Tommy Taylor and the Ship That Sank Twice.
they're
Those hand lettered, like
yes, sometimes they're tough, and you can tell. I mean, there are some fonts out there. It was a font that was used on for anyone that read Spider Gwen over at Marvel, where D's and P's all look the same because of the shape of like the size of the loop in the letter. And it's just that there's some fonts that when they don't work, or you can tell if they've covered up art or there isn't a flow across the page. When lettering is done not well, it is it diminishes the reading experiences. But when it is done well, you're right, oftentimes it is invisible and it just enhances it and you don't even realize it. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of variety in this book in terms of multiple fonts and different types of things there, but there was a storytelling aspect of understanding how sequential art storytelling works. And also there has to be an understanding of how a person is going to read this in terms of where their eyes are going to start and how they're going to move across a page and down a panel. And so that, when done well, should be invisible because your eyes should just move across the page. You
right.
should be taking in the story. And so no, I think Cardinal Ray did a great job with that, because there are there are
Oh, and there are
parts here
still
where
stories where
yeah
I'll read books that have come out this year. I'm not going to call them out, where boxes are at slightly different heights, even though they're both in like the middle third of the page,
mhm,
and you start reading top to bottom. You have to choose top to bottom or left to right,
yeah
and it's kind of a 50-50 shot. And every once in a while I realize I read a conversation out of order,
yeah well
and I don't get
because
bent out of shape, but it is like a little frustrating because it's
it
just a
it
little speed bump.
it takes you out of it because it wasn't clear from whatever came above it how your eye was supposed to go down the page.
Right.
Because yes, there are often times when we we think about reading comics in America, top to bottom, left to right. You're correct on that. But sometimes as you move, maybe the top part of the page, maybe the top row, the top panels, left to right. But then as you come down, maybe you're coming down right to left because you're moving back down to the bottom left-hand corner to then go to the bottom right-hand. So it's more like you're moving in a backward Z shape, like a 2 shape, something like that. And if it's not clear from the paneling above how you read the middle panel, you absolutely can read things out of order. If it's not clear by how the lettering is set up, be it word balloons or narration boxes, however it is. So yeah, it is a subtle thing that more often than not, when it's done poorly, it sticks out. And when it's done well, you honestly shouldn't see it. You should just be taking in the story because it should be invisible. And you should just be enjoying and experiencing the words and the pictures together, because that's where these two things meet. That's where it's seamless. So
yeah. So anyway, I really, really love this book. Long story short, it's probably not that hard to tell after listening to us talk for an hour and a half, but it checks all the boxes for me. It has a surprising amount of action.
It does
something I didn't even need from it.
It picks on a lot of genres. The detective noir thriller crime-ish story is something that I love, which is, as I always say, Brubaker and Phillips, they're the masters of noir. They're my favorite creative team in comics. What I love about Bylines and Blood is that it takes that genre, and it's not trying to do that better or different. That they've mixed in so many other genres very smartly, a little bit here and there, that gives this just a different type of flavor. That it's not just a noir detective story. It's not just an action story. It's not a vigilante story. It's not just social commentary on our world and reflective of our understanding of truth. It's not just a character study. There are a lot of aspects to it, and it doesn't feel overwhelmed. It doesn't feel too much, It doesn't feel like they threw too much on top here. Everything works in a level of balance there, because there are just enough of these different genres that keep things fresh in the story. And I think that can be incredibly difficult to do, but I think it goes to show how these three main creators worked and collaborated so well together, that they could take these different aspects and blend into a story, kind of bringing in all of the strengths of all three of them. So no, it's a very cool book. I'm glad you recommended this one. This is one of the, every once in a while we get one of those books that Mike has read that I haven't, for the show. So more often than not, I've read things that Mike
incredibly rare.
It is, and so it's
or
always
at least
great.
you've at least dabbled in it, right? I mean, I think one time I was like,
or at least aware of it. Like this is a book I wasn't even that aware of. So,
although I think also some credit goes to we saw Erica Schultz at the Lexington Comic Convention, whatever that's called.
Yeah,
and had a booth right next to our friend Liana Kangas.
Yeah,
and Liana also endorsed the book and set us up to interview Erica Schultz, which we will be bringing to you next week.
Yeah, which so cannot wait to do that. That should be a lot of fun as well. It was can't wait to get into more of this book, because they said there are so many aspects and layers to it. And I think it's always interesting whenever there are co-writers on a book, how that collaboration.
I don't think we haven't dealt with that.
Oh, that's a good point. Have we dealt with anything that where it's been officially credited as co-writers? I don't think we have.
No, in fact, given the nature of our series, or of our podcast, I don't even think we've dealt with a series that passes writing back and forth from issue to issue. Like an ongoing series does sometimes. Ongoing, they'll have somebody come in and pinch hit for an issue, especially if it's a crossover tie-in or something like that.
Well, that's more of a big two thing. So, but exactly. Still, even the idea of a collaborative writing process and then going from there to an artist is something we haven't done before. I didn't even think about that, but no, it'll be great. Looking forward to talking to Erica about this book here. obviously there was as we mentioned last week, this being on AfterShock, there's some tricky and sticky legal situations going on with them due to their current bankruptcy situation as we record this now in early spring as 2024. So I don't know how much we can talk about or even go into any potential futures of this book, which is really unfortunate, but at the very least we have a pretty cool 4-issue miniseries that does exist, even if that's all we ever get out of it.
Yeah, and I think like every good series of that nature, my headcanon can already start writing the next chapter of the story. Whether we get it or not.
Yeah.
The world is so clear in my mind. The character is so well defined.
It still exists. It still goes on.
Right. It's one of those, like you can see what happens on the next page. And in some sense, that's the argument for like, you don't even need it because the story goes on. On the other hand, it's
definitely.
Like, it's, I'll give you money if you keep telling me.
That's what I'm going to say. Yeah. Do I need it? No. If it existed, would I buy it? Absolutely. I just want more stories there. The story doesn't need it. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger where you're like, oh, what happens next? No, it's just, I like being in this world. I like being with this character. And characters. I'll throw Tom in there too. Tom and such. I like being there. I like being with them. I like the world that they set up in. I want to read more. I don't have to read more. The story is complete. It's not like you feel unfulfilled at the end. But if we don't get any more, I can live with that. I'm content with that. But I'm always going to take more. When there's a creative team, if they want to keep telling stories, if they can, if they're allowed to, if it's a possibility, I'm all for it. But doesn't sound great right now. But we'll let that play out as it is. And in the meantime, just be happy we got this book in this version that we did right now.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. And I think your reading experience, even if you found our coverage lackluster, you will not be disappointed when we talk to Erica Schultz next week. And just cannot wait for you to hear that conversation. And we will see you next Thursday.
Peace.